Good morning. I am Kevin Price. Delighted to talk to you about you and your business. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. I hope it's a great day for you. I hope you make it a great day. I've got a great list of guests lined up for today's program. And as often I do in this program, I take some liberty. It's the price of business, but I do talk about politics. And frankly, in my opinion, the two are pretty heavily intertwined. Political economy is kind of a macro expression of what's happening on the micro level. I've got Bryan Riley with me, and I think Bryan's been on the program before. He's with the Heritage Foundation, which is one of the country's premier think tanks, certainly the country's premier conservative think tank, and they do an annual index of economic freedom. They've been doing it for quite some time in partnership with the Wall Street Journal. And Bryan, delighted to have you on the program. Welcome.
Hey, good to be here. Thank you.
Real quickly, what exactly do you do over there at Heritage? What's your role?
I'm a senior policy analyst and mainly work on international trade policy, so look at things like trade barriers in the United States and in other countries. And as part of my job, I'm one of several analysts here that contribute to our annual index of economic freedom, which was just released this last week. So, fortunately,
I need to get you back on the show to talk about trade because neither side seems to understand trade, to be honest with you. You know, our side look at trade deficits as always bad when the reality is that we were it's also an indicator, trade deficits are also an indicator of the buying power of a country. Our biggest trade surplus happened during the Great Depression, and it's not nearly as black and white as say, looking at real deficits, economic spending deficits.
Well, I just looked at the last 10 years, literally just yesterday, and when our trade deficit increased, our GDP grew much faster than in years when the trade deficit declined. Yep. So the numbers certainly bear out exactly what you just said, but that's
right. During the Great Depression, we had one of our biggest surpluses in terms of percentages ever, and that's because we couldn't afford to buy other countries' goods. And so it's an interesting phenomenon. But let's talk about this Economic Freedom Index. The Fraser Institute, I'm sure you're familiar with, they produce their own index. They rank the United States 18 now. You guys ranked them still in the top 10, but just barely in. And I guess about 8 years ago, we were still considered mostly primarily free. I can't remember the exact language. Now we're one category below that, if I recall.
Yes, exactly. We dropped from free to mostly free. So we remain in the top 10, but the category we're in has fallen. We would have actually fallen out of the top 10 this year in our rankings, except several other countries around the world dropped as well. It's actually been 5 straight years that the U.S. Economic Freedom Score has dropped. And we started doing our rankings back in 1995. There are other groups that do similar reports, and they found similar kinds of relationships. For example, we find, and I don't think this will come as a shock to you, that countries that have more economic freedom are more prosperous. They have lower poverty rates. People have more opportunities. And there are different groups that use different methodologies but come up with not identical but similar results. And by the way, our index is all posted on our website. All the data is there if anybody wants to take a look at it at heritage.org. We have 10 different factors that we rank, including property rights, regulatory efficiency, monetary policy, and then things like debts and deficits, which are areas which are responsible for us not moving forward but falling backwards.
I do want to have funny you use the slogan forward there, but anyway, I do want you're going to make me physically ill. Be careful, but and I do want to mention right now at usdailyreview.com, which the audience is very familiar with, our sister news website. Right there on the homepage is the very article that we received from Heritage about this, and so we want to encourage you to check out that article there with links that go right back to Heritage. And, Heritage is just a phenomenal resource. It's one of my favorites, has been for years. And so I never worked directly for Heritage, although I've been in their annual guide to policy experts. And I worked in your building many years ago when I was with the National Center for Public Policy Research, working with Amy Morris, Amy Ridenour, whom I'm sure you know.
Well, definitely, and I've been fortunate to be at Heritage for about the last 3 years. I've worked in public policy for quite a while. Went back to the Midwest and worked for a few years, and so I got outside the Beltway, but got just drawn back in. If anybody's looking for a job, I suggest you move to D.C. You know, the government's hiring. Nobody else is.
Oh, please don't tell people to do that. Oh, my. So talk to me a little bit. Have you taken a look at the index and look at where the United States would be on that index if there had not been any change in other countries?
Well, that's an interesting question. We've done that with respect not necessarily to our overall score, but with respect to some specific scores. You know, for the last 5 years, I mentioned that we've fallen back 5 years in a row. There's only one other country, Ireland, or one other developed country, I should say, that's also dropped for 5 straight years. Our score today is the same as it was in 2000. I don't mean our ranking of number 10. I mean our overall economic freedom score. So it got better, and then it's been going down, and we've fallen back to where we were in 2000. The countries that do the best, by the way, are countries like Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, and the countries that do the worst are countries like North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela. And I think if you ask most people, would you rather live in Australia or North Korea? Matt, I know what I would choose.
Yeah, well, I'm actually entertaining moving to Australia. You know, my wife looks at me with some chagrin, but it's like, they always stay consistently in the top. We are consistently moving in the wrong direction, I'm afraid. I find it shocking, though, that the score in 2000 was the same as it is today. I felt like America was a lot more free, you know, economically, even in 2000 with Bill Clinton, with the highest tax rates that we had then since Eisenhower administration. But I still felt we were more free than we are now, but apparently not.
Well, and although our score is just related to our policies, our rankings are based on how other countries are doing as well. So we may be falling backwards, but if countries like Greece and France and others are falling backwards, then our ranking might stay the same, even though we're not getting any more free or that we're losing freedom. And there are some good things here. I want to point out things that I take for granted, like property rights, the ability to own land, the ability to get a title to your house that many people in the world don't have those kinds of opportunities. So the situation is not dire, but looking at the explosion of regulations, taxes, as you mentioned, and really the big concern many of us have here is the deficit and the huge debt and how we're going to pay that off and what the implications are for our economy in the long term, because lots of research is showing that countries with gigantic debts don't grow as fast as those that have managed to control their debt. And Canada is an example where they've done a better job, certainly not a perfect country, but they've done a better job of controlling spending and their debt in recent years than we have here in the United States.
And anecdotally, when I talk to Canadians who are in industries that, you know, historically are heavily regulated, they're not facing nearly as hostile as a regulatory environment, particularly like in energy, that Americans are facing.
Well, and we have high corporate tax rates here, so a lot of people will complain about things like outsourcing, and it seems to me that we need to have a competitive environment, one that creates opportunities for people to invest here and make money. Over 5 million Americans work for affiliates of foreign-owned companies, so let's have an environment that attracts more investment instead of driving companies overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I both know businesses don't pay taxes anyway. All they are is tax collectors. As long as the business is making profit, they're transferring that cost. And so it's a fixed cost of doing business. If we make it too high, they're going to do business somewhere else. So why don't we just acknowledge that economic reality, get rid of taxes on business, and have an economic explosion that would take place and make us the most competitive country in the world, instead of playing these ridiculous shell games in which politicians use businesses as tax collectors to our own demise. Bryan, thanks for being with us. Great conversation.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again. Have a great week.
You bet. Bryan Riley, he's with the Heritage Foundation. You can learn more about him at heritage.org. I'm Kevin Price. You want to remind you can read the same article that we were talking about at usdailyreview.com. Check that out. More right after this. This is the American